Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this Thursday night in-depth ag forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. Well, I just flew in from a great meeting out in New York corn and soybean growers, and just arrived in Memphis, and I pulled over to do this recording because I've really been watching the weather today, and I wanted to get the latest updates out to you. Just thinking about Memphis, though, sharing its name with that ancient Egyptian city, I actually thought we'd start over on that side of the world and actually take it to Europe. So what we had released just recently was the latest European drought monitor. Now, it's run a little differently than the U.S. drought monitor in that they tend to break up each month into 10-day kind of periods and look at the extensiveness of the drought. So what you've got here is that drought indicator map for the end of July, and it's extensive from Spain through France into Germany and all the way over here into parts of parts of Ukraine. Very extensive drought issues they've had this summer. Now, just keeping in that line of thinking, I want to show you just some articles that have recently cropped up, and a lot of folks have been asking me about the extensiveness of this drought. So just to let you know, some of the biggest river systems in France and Germany, Spain, getting over toward central Europe are really down. The picture you're looking at here is from a Bloomberg article about how low the Rhine River is, which runs right through the middle of Germany as a major part of their commerce. Now, a tool I'm going to link this for you, but I want you to use, it's a great one here, is this one. And actually, you can click on any country in the world and get an Ndvi graph, like the one you see down here at the bottom. And it's got four different things on it. It's got an average Ndvi value, and it's got an envelope here with a min and max that'll tell you over the last 20 years what the minimum and maximum Ndvi values have been. And then it gives you the previous year, 2021, and then the current year. So when you're looking at this, we always just want to see the current year relative to past years. And in France, which is what I've clicked on, it's the same thing for Germany. It's the new low Ndvi value in the last 20 years, just indicating major crop stress from satellite. So I'll link this so you can play around with it. It's a great site to kind of get used to. Another thing I got asked about today, great question, was about the volcanic eruption that we've had here in Iceland, a new volcano, and the question was, is it putting up anything that could alter the fall weather patterns or the climate? And at this particular point, this video, again, all the credit here is going to go to Brian Empfinger, who has presented this video. This is not one that's producing large amounts of sulfur dioxide that's getting deep into the stratosphere. So just want to let you know, we'll watch for stuff like this, but at this point it's not something that I'm overly concerned about. I want to take you next to South America, because we talked in the last video about the risk of having dry conditions in southern Brazil, Paraguay, Uruguay, and Argentina going into this growing season. Remember, it starts in about 5 weeks where they can plant across much of Brazil. And we noticed that the long-range forecasts were supportive of more rain north. So does this map, which you've been looking at, which is a correlation with La Niña and the precipitation patterns. They tended to be better north and drier to the south. Well, what I want to talk about here is kind of what's going on in the near-term forecast. Today's 12Z model run shows much above average precipitation over the next 15 days in parts of southern Brazil, from this would be Mato Grosso do Sul through Paraná and Rio Grande do Sul, while drier down in Argentina. And this is going to happen. We're going to see long-range forecasts show one thing, but the near term may show another. So I'm going to watch this very carefully, because I think this is going to be critical in assessing where this is going to go. But the drought that's been endured in parts of Argentina is going to be an important story going forward. And this next map here shows you, just look at the one over here on the left as an example, that the Ndvi values across parts of Argentina are quite low right now compared to normal. So this is going to be a critical thing to watch. I'll also keep my close eye on the GRACE, the satellite-derived root zone soil moisture maps, because we have to wait on the monsoon to return here before we really start to plant. And so that's what's going to be the big key factor, is do the rains return in really late September, early October, to get them off to a fast start. That's going to be very important. Okay, now that we've looked a bit internationally, let's come back to the U.S., because today on Thursday we did have a new drought monitor that was released. And overall, the bigger picture of this map didn't change too much. So we kind of keep discussing some of those same areas I've been concerned about for a while. Most of that's going to come right in here to this part of the Western Corn Belt and Plains. This has been an area that over the last several weeks has missed some of the bigger rainfall events, and even missed the rainfall events today. Also, pockets throughout New England. Like I said, I was just in upstate New York, and I've seen some of the drought conditions that are being endured here. And also because of the proximity to that big subtropical ridge we saw at the end of the end of July, beginning of August, we've now seen drought creep back into parts of Florida, stretching right up here along the coastal Carolinas out of Georgia. Of course, our long-standing drought in Texas, which is really pushing hard on having a top 5 driest year on record, that is going to be an area of major change that we're going to talk about here in the very near term. Okay, so where are we going with this? Are these gaps going to get filled in that have not been filled in over the last 2 weeks? This again is that 2-week precipitation map. We're going to look at this a lot just to see this drought picture evolve, and it very much mirrors that soil moisture map that I just showed you. Well, as we think about what got us there, okay, since the beginning of August, we've had a very active southwest monsoon. This is a ridge down here. The flows kind of come around this. It's a bit blocked here, but it's done something like this. And there's been a big subtropical ridge that sat here. And this has been the subtropical ridge that's really just fed that tremendous amount of moisture that's gotten into the southeast that sparked some of those really, really heavy rains we've seen lately. I'm talking all the way back to the end of July and now through the early part of August. In fact, just recently some heavy rains that have hit over in parts of the mid-Atlantic. So this is the pattern we're going to have to watch to see if we can break away from and see some change in. But I'll tell you, just in the last 72 hours, locally some very heavy rainfall stretching through the Tennessee Valley and Ohio Valley down into the southeast. In fact, you can even see in the radar image kind of the curl in the flow coming around that subtropical high. You can also see how wide open the ridge has become. It's brought showers and storms, including heavy rain out of New Mexico and Arizona, through Nevada, Utah, all the way up into the Pacific Northwest. And just today we watched showers and storms come down right through here on this weak frontal boundary that's stretching through the midsection of the country. I was watching it on satellite today just because it was kind of fascinating sitting at the airport keeping an eye on this. But again, see the whole day of convection down here in the southeast. The front has sagged far enough south that it's drier now in the southern plains. But here's that front that brought in some of that critical rain to Iowa. But I was looking where that rain came through, right in through here. And if you go back and take a look at that soil moisture map, which is right here, you'll see that a lot of that rain came through an area, this spot right in through here, that lately had been getting better precip. It's more to the south and west of that area that's really hurting for moisture. So we're just kind of taking a look there. You can also see as the sun was setting, we did have quite a bit of wildfire smoke in the Pacific Northwest, especially this big fire that's in parts of northern California. We're going to keep a close eye on. Okay, I'm pressing forward because I want to get to this. We've talked about it all week, and now we're seeing that over the next 7 days, the pattern is really evolving to look something like this. And what you've got here is that west coast trough. It's still there, but it's more anchored over the Bering Sea. So the flow is becoming very highly amplified, and it's dropping into a deeper trough that's centering somewhere between, the Midwest, Great Lakes, and New England. Now, what this particular pattern is going to do is return a lot of heat to the Pacific Northwest. Storms will cascade over the top of this, getting into the plains. That's going to be critical. But to the south of this trough, that will be where the temperature boundary will be. There'll be a front down here. And you see this big open ridge out here? It's still going to be pushing moisture into that area. So what we're going to be seeing here is a precipitation pattern over the next 15 days that looks like this. We watched it evolve all week, and this is now the latest updates we've got. So the southwest monsoon, extensive. There will be some severe storms rolling through the Canadian Prairie initially coming around that big ridge. We'll get isolated pockets of rain that'll come through the Midwest. But where the front stalls out next week, now this is next week, we could possibly bring in some much needed rain into some of the driest places in the U.S. Take note of the central and western Corn Belt though. Outside of some rain that's coming here really in the next 24 hours, this area could be drier overall. We're also seeing wetter conditions kind of pull up the East Coast too. Okay, so with that is our thought process. This pattern adjustment we're seeing, can we relate it to the bigger factor we've been talking about all summer, which is La Niña? Well, not a whole lot has changed with La Niña. Okay, we still have the very cold ocean water here, the strong trade winds here. We've got the same ocean temperature pattern in the Atlantic and in the North Pacific with that big blob of heat between Hawaii and the Aleutian Islands. So not much has changed here, but I've seen some fluctuations in these trade winds that's let the MJO move a little bit around. And I think it's right here where this is happening. Now, I know we're getting in the weeds a bit, but over the next 10 days or so, instead of having strong westerly wind bursts consistently coming out of the Indian Ocean, we had some strong trades there. And I think it's just shifting the way that the momentum's getting transferred out of the tropics, allowing for the Pacific jet to reposition a little bit here as well. But the trade winds are still on. I mean, you can see them in through here, still pushing in this direction, saying that this La Niña still has some steam left in it. But that was a big question I called into, the video on Monday, and I want to talk to you about that for a second. Because when we look out over the time period of August 24 to September 24, the current European model doesn't want to let the current pattern escape. It just wants to hang on to it. So that means big ridges in the west and heat, drier air coming through the midsection of the country, but active southwest monsoon with stalled out frontal boundaries from Texas over toward the Carolinas. Now that's a new look. We've not seen the European advertise this look yet. So we have to ask ourselves, is the pattern really permanently going to adjust to favor a more western ridge? That's kind of the big question I think a lot of us are thinking about. I don't have an answer for you yet. I've got to see the La Niña take back control of this pattern for that to occur, to push the ridge back into the midsection of the country, bringing the heat, the excessive heat away from the northwest especially, and at times through the Canadian prairie. So just thinking about that, I even want to stretch it out farther. I'm going to ask about the longer term kind of livelihood of this La Niña. And I'm going to be honest with you. If you remember back in winter, I really botched this forecast. I thought that by summer we would see the La Niña fading hard, and it didn't do that. Now, this is the new guidance that we just got from the CPC, from Columbia University as well. They curate the graphics here. And again, they've got through October, November, December, and actually through the beginning of winter, they have got La Niña being the most dominant factor, well above a 60% chance of it continuing. But then they split at the end, and they show neutral conditions showing up at some point midwinter, or maybe even early winter, but no strong indications of an El Nino forming. Now, normally, when you come out of your second El Nino winter, your second El Nino year, the chance of having a quick spike up into an El Nino for the next year is very high. But this is one of those triple events, and we've only had that happen twice in the last 70 years, and the last time was over 20 years ago that this occurred. So there's very little guidance on this. And I just want to make a point here before I go on. If I were to take you back to January and show you the forecasts from then, this is what they said that we would see the La Niña do from winter. Collapse into March, April, and May, and by midsummer we would be back in neutral conditions. So I just want to remind you that these long-range forecasts of this big event, El Nino, La Niña, they're not as reliable as we want. But again, we still see the influence of the La Niña on the fall pattern, and let's talk about that briefly here. I mentioned it on Monday, but the models are really aggressively going over from, the lower Mississippi River Valley through the Tennessee and Ohio Valley and southeast, a drier pattern. And I want to show you just some updates from the CPC suggesting the same thing. Drier in the Mid-South, drier in the South, Southern Plains, lower Mississippi River Valley for this fall. Now, when you think about this, I want you to remember that these type forecasts rarely verify for fall. And the reason is because it's also the peak of the tropical cyclone season. One big tropical cyclone can come through and wipe this forecast out in a second. But right now, we're not watching anything. That system we kept an eye on all week, well, National Hurricane Center's now left it off the table. And I agree with them, it ran into too much shear and way too much dry air. And as a result, it's kind of on its way out. The wind shear lately has been picking up in the Atlantic, and that's an important factor to look for. High wind shear values in the tropics during a hurricane season tend to suppress the hurricane season. The models right now, all they're watching is another wave coming off of Africa, but nothing big and organized really developing over the next 10 days across the Atlantic. What they've got their eye on, though, is this right here. It's just this wave. That's it. This is African easterly wave. It's part of the monsoonal circulation, but that's about it. What it's going to have to deal with, though, is the fact that there's still a bunch of very dry and dusty air, and that's really worked hard to suppress this season. I had thought earlier that we would see an end to this really dry and dusty air by this point, allowing for these tropical systems to really get going, but it just seems to persist now and through the next 10 days. So that kind of gets us an idea about what's happening in the tropics after examining that fall outlook. So let's finish this up with a near-term forecast. The pattern right now still resembles a lot of what we've seen this past week. This is this afternoon's high-res NAM model. So into this evening, a lot of scattered storms in the south. There's that weak sagging front that delivered some rain to Iowa. We've got some scattered storms in New England, and the impressive size and shape here of the southwestern monsoon. So as we play in the overnight hours and get out there to Friday, I am watching this little wave here. It's actually tucked between two high pressure systems, and it's going to run out of the Red River Valley of the North into Minnesota, possibly clipping eastern Iowa early tomorrow morning, and then going through Wisconsin, maybe northern Illinois, and then regaining position on the overnight hours on Friday night into Saturday morning, coming into Michigan, possibly bringing in a chance for some stronger storms into northern Illinois and Indiana. It could continue into the eastern Corn Belt as well, which would be very much needed precipitation. I'm also keeping an eye on where the front sags down here into the Gulf of Mexico. Right here, the models are toying with this idea of kind of spinning up a little coastal low and bringing some of that moisture into Texas, which is needed. But it's going to be on Saturday that we really start to see the pattern make a new move, and let's see where it's going to go after that. First of all, by Saturday, getting into Sunday even, we're going to see some really good dry air coming into New England. And the overnight lows are going to drop off. We're going to see some cooler weather. But this map showing you dew point temperature shows you where that moisture is going to be going over the next 7 days. We're going to trap most of our 70-degree dew point temperatures pretty far to the south, rather than like we had been seeing where they've really advanced farther to the north as of late. And that's going to be seen in watching a front finally push all the way to the Gulf Coast. Check it out here, okay? High-res European model. We've already seen through Thursday and into Friday. So you notice here on Saturday morning, we're going to watch the storms right here as the front clears the coast. And those storms could move through Michigan and into the eastern Corn Belt. Now, at this point on Sunday, our pattern looks like this. Large ridge, elongated frontal boundary, and trough of lower pressure setting up here. And this ridge is just going to migrate to the west with time. So storms will roll through the Canadian Prairie. See them up here? We'll then have storms that run over the ridge, possibly bringing rain to Nebraska. That would be Monday morning, afternoon, and evening. I'm almost hoping and counting on these rains coming in, given how dry it is here. But with the flow coming around and wrapping up into a trough, we could get some coastal precipitation right here in parts of the Carolinas, getting up to Virginia, all the way to Pennsylvania, as the system rolls up the east coast. It's a weak system, but it's there, as storms cascade right now into the mid-south. This is by Tuesday. Now, once we get out there to Wednesday and Thursday, you've got a large ridge and heat. You have a deep trough that's setting up right here and a front to its south. So next Wednesday into Thursday and Friday, Saturday, we'll just play on through. You're going to see lots of storms here. And then if I go back over that, the end of next week, where that trough sits right over the Great Lakes, I'm just rocking back and forth over Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, we could get some scattered showers and storms rolling around inside of that trough. Now, that's a lot of change happening, but if we distill it down into a couple of maps, that's the European model forecast for the next 7 days. Okay? This is the GFS, European GFS. Once again, the GFS is the wetter model throughout the Western Plains into the southeast. It's really a wetter model overall when you look at this pattern. Sorry, a bunch of motorcycles just pulled up behind me here, so you can probably hear the motors there. But let's keep going through this and talk now about the temperature aspect of it and the week 2 precipitation. Because even out there on the 21st of August, still a trough of low pressure. The ridge is here, trough sitting here over the eastern Corn Belt. What we have to watch is to see if this ridge starts to pull back into the Central Plains, which will be very characteristic of a La Niña. That's what I'll be watching. But in the meantime, this pulls a front and just leaves it right down here across the southern United States, and that's where the rain is. That's the week 2 precipitation pattern by the European. And the GFS, let's see if we can pull this up quick. The GFS ensemble shows almost the exact same thing. There we go. See it? So, multi-model evidence. I'm going to finish with the discussion about temperatures. You've got here the overnight low temperatures from July into early August. And many places are right now having some of the hottest overnight lows on record, from the Carolinas through western Kentucky and Tennessee into the Mid-South, all the way here from Texas to the Four Corners in the west. All right? What I've also been paying attention to are those stress degree days. Let's blow this up and have a look. Remember, this is adding up temperature above 86 Fahrenheit. According to Elwyn Taylor's research out of Iowa State, if you accumulate more than 140 of these on dryland farming, and he studied Iowa here, you can have some serious crop stress. So this is where we currently sit. Okay, I put in red anything over 140. Now look, this was, whoa, too fast there. This was last year. This was the year before, 2020. We go back into 19 and 18. I'm going to go a little faster here to show you the last time we saw stress degree days advancing as far north as they currently are. In fact, it was much farther. And it was in 2012. So again, this is 2012. Take a good look. And this is 2022. So not quite the same, but we've had a lot of heat in the midsection of the country, and it's still there. Forecast highs for Friday were 103 degrees Fahrenheit in parts of central northern Nebraska, And throughout much of this forecast, cooler weather east of the Mississippi, but we got to see the hot temperatures on Saturday and into Sunday and even into early Monday here, still sitting in the plains. But it's early next week that the front sags, the pattern changes, we lose all the excessive heat as it builds into the northwest. Now we're back up into triple digits here. And it's going to stick there for a while. Last graphic today shows you this. As we just play forward this 5-day sliding window, I'm going to stop you out here day 5 through 10. This would end on the 21st of August. And you can see the heat in the Canadian Prairie, the heat that's along the west coast. This is 5 to 15 degrees above normal, while cooler weather sags across much of the rest of the United States. And as we just play this on out here, fully into the third week of the month, and we're going to stop it right out here on August the 26th, we once again see that the pattern's trying to open up into the mid part of the country, but we have big questions as to whether or not it can do that. And certainly the new long-range guidance didn't give us the best hint. So we've got a lot to be watching this weekend. I'll analyze it and talk to you again on Monday morning. I appreciate your attention tonight. Have a good one. Thanks.